I learned cursive writing in order to do autographs when I was 6 years old.
They called him America's favorite child star. But behind the cameras, Ron Howard was bullied by co-stars, cheated by studios, and nearly ruined by lawsuits that almost ended his career before it began. The truth he's finally admitting now isn't inspirational, it's disturbing, and it changes everything you thought you knew about him. Before Ron Howard ever stepped onto a film set, his life was already shaped by desperation, risk, and a decision his parents almost regretted forever. He wasn't born into Hollywood. He was dragged into it out of survival. In 1954, Ron came into the world in Duncan, Oklahoma. His father, Rance, was a struggling actor who had just left the Air Force. His mother, Jean, was an actress trying to find steady work. They didn't have savings, connections, or guarantees, just a belief that something might eventually break their way. By 1958, things got so bad they sold what little they owned, packed up their old car, and moved to California with their 4-year-old son. They ended up in a cramped home in Burbank, barely able to afford rent. The house sat close to a major studio, but that didn't mean privilege, just rent they could barely pay. Ron didn't go to a preschool like other kids his age. His classroom became film sets and rehearsal halls, not because his parents were chasing child fame, but because they were chasing rent money. They made one rule: no long-term contracts until he turned 5. That choice almost destroyed them. But the strangest twist came even earlier, before Ron could speak. In 1956, when he was just 18 months old, his father took a small part in a Western film called Frontier Woman. They needed a baby on set for one scene. Instead of hiring one, Rance handed over his son. One shot, no plan, no contract, no idea what it would lead to. That was the moment everything changed, quietly, accidentally, and without warning. But success didn't follow money. It followed debt, humiliation, and a decision his parents nearly reversed. Because within a year, they were so broke his father considered abandoning Hollywood and going back to Oklahoma to become a farmer. And that was before the first real blow even landed. By 1959, Ron had turned 5, the age his parents had set as the line they wouldn't cross. That's when they finally allowed him to start taking real roles, and almost instantly, Hollywood took notice. But fame didn't bring protection, it brought something far more vicious. That same year, he was cast in a film called The Journey. For the first time, his name appeared in the credits. That should have been a proud moment, but something ugly happened behind the scenes. Crew members mocked his freckles and red hair, calling him names like freckle-faced freak. He was 5 years old. His father, who was also working on set, nearly lost his own job defending him. Money was still so tight that his parents debated leaving California altogether. Their debt had grown to what would now equal about $5,000. And to make matters worse, another responsibility arrived. Ron's younger brother, Clint, was born in April 1959. Then everything changed in 1960. Ron auditioned for a brand new television show built around a gentle Southern sheriff and his small-town son. More than 300 kids tried for the role of Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show. Ron didn't have a stage mom shoving him forward or a manager pulling strings. He just had a face people trusted. He got the role. The show premiered on October 3, 1960. Ron was 6. He appeared in 243 of the show's 249 episodes, at $300 an episode to start, and eventually $1,000 per episode. He was suddenly the family's only real source of income. Millions of viewers saw a warm, safe world on screen, but off-camera, he was still a child forced to memorize lines, hit cues, and work long days with no safety rules to protect him. Because 1 year into the show, something happened on set that nearly ended everything, not just his career, but his life. And producers did everything they could to bury it. By the time Ron was 8 years old, he was already a household name. Viewers saw a smiling kid in a peaceful town. What they didn't see was the danger no one on set bothered to prevent. In 1962, during filming for The Andy Griffith Show, producers wanted a calm fishing scene on a lake. There were no stunt doubles, no life jackets, no safety divers, just an 8-year-old boy and a camera crew trying to get the perfect shot. Ron was sitting in a small boat with Andy Griffith when something went wrong. The boat tipped, and Ron fell straight into the water. He couldn't swim well enough to save himself. There were no safety protocols in place, just panic. Andy didn't wait for anyone else. He threw himself into the water and pulled Ron out before the crew even reacted. If he hadn't been there, or if he had hesitated for even a few seconds, Ron Howard would have died on the set of the show that made him famous. But Hollywood didn't allow mistakes like that to be seen. The incident was quietly covered up. No press, no statements, not even a mention in studio logs. Producers were terrified of public backlash. They wanted the world to believe filming was as safe as the show looked on TV. For Ron, it was the moment he learned the truth. He wasn't a kid to them. He was an asset. And assets don't drown. They get replaced. After that, the work didn't slow down. There were no therapy sessions, no time off, no apology. Instead, expectations rose. He was expected to perform perfectly, stay composed, and deliver lines like nothing had happened. And as long as the cameras were rolling, no one cared what it was doing to him behind the scenes. But he was about to learn that surviving an accident wasn't the same as surviving Hollywood.
When The Andy Griffith Show ended in 1968, Ron Howard was 14, and suddenly, everything he'd built his identity around disappeared. The world still saw him as Opie, but casting directors saw something worse, a kid they couldn't use. He auditioned more than 50 times in 1968 and 1969. Every rejection sounded the same. Too familiar, too soft, too Opie. It didn't matter that he had more on-screen experience than grown actors. Hollywood had already labeled him, and labels in this industry don't peel off. They stick. The money from his childhood roles was already stretched thin. His parents never lived like celebrities. They spent most of it on rent, food, and trying to keep their family afloat. When the job stopped coming, Ron had to find another way to pay his own expenses. So in 1971, America's most recognizable child star started delivering newspapers before school. 200 homes, $150 a month. Not for fun, but so he could afford dates with the only person who treated him like a normal human being, Cheryl Alley. But the blows kept coming. In April 1971, while driving to an audition, Ron was rear-ended by a truck. The crash caused whiplash that affected his movement for years, and the medical bills reached $3,000. He didn't have insurance. He sold his bike just to survive. Even when he booked small roles like Gentle Ben, they paid a fraction of what he used to earn on Griffith. Everyone assumed he was rich. He wasn't. Worse, he started experiencing panic every time he walked into an audition room. He hid it from his parents, terrified that if he spoke up, they'd think he was ungrateful for everything they'd sacrificed. And while he was fighting just to stay afloat, Hollywood was preparing to remind him in the cruelest way possible that it never forgets where you came from or who you used to be. Because the next time he landed a major role, his co-stars didn't welcome him, they targeted him. In 1973, Ron Howard got what should have been his comeback moment, a role in American Graffiti, directed by a then-unknown George Lucas. It was his first big break since being typecast after The Andy Griffith Show. On the surface, everything looked promising, but behind the scenes, the set became one of the darkest experiences of his young adult life. He was 19 when filming began. His co-stars included Harrison Ford and Paul Le Mat, both older, both frustrated with Hollywood, and both convinced Ron had coasted into the role because of his childhood fame. They didn't see him as a cast member. They saw him as Opie, and they made him pay for it. On July 15th, they threw beer bottles toward his car while yelling, "Dance, Opie, dance!" It wasn't a joke. It was humiliation. Days later, on July 20th, they locked him inside a trailer as a prank while rehearsals were happening without him. He was too embarrassed to report it. He didn't want to look weak or difficult to work with. The worst moments were off camera. His drinks were spiked. He was mocked to his face. They called it Opie shaming, and he stayed silent. Not because he was okay with it, but because he knew no one would protect him if he spoke out. The film was a massive hit, making $115 million on a $777,000 budget. Ron earned a flat $10,000. No profit share, no bonus, no respect. Years later, Harrison Ford apologized, but apologies don't erase trauma, especially when the industry rewards silence. That same year, just months before filming, Ron had started dating Cheryl Alley. Their relationship was already under fire. Rumors spread in high school that she was pregnant, and those lies cost him acting work and nearly ruined Cheryl's reputation. Yet, she stayed, even when Hollywood didn't. But survival wasn't success, and his biggest fight was still coming, inside a show that almost erased his name from its own title. In 1974, Ron Howard was offered a role that would change his career again. Richie Cunningham on Happy Days. It looked like a win. Steady pay, national visibility, and a chance to finally move past the Opie label. But Hollywood doesn't hand out victories without a cost. When the show launched on January 15, 1974, the focus was on Richie, the clean-cut, red-haired teenager in 1950s Milwaukee. Ratings were good, not great. Ron was earning $1,000 an episode, just enough to stabilize his life. But everything shifted in 1976. One supporting character, Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli, played by Henry Winkler, exploded in popularity. Ratings skyrocketed. Within months, Fonzie merchandise alone was bringing in more than $1 million. Studios saw dollar signs, and suddenly, Ron wasn't the face of the show anymore. He was in the way. ABC executives made a decision behind the scenes that could have wiped him out in one move. They planned to rename the show to Fonzie's Happy Days. Ron was 22 at the time, beloved by viewers, but powerless in the boardroom. He didn't stay silent. In November 1976, he walked into the producer's office and issued an ultimatum. If they changed the title, he would quit, contract or not. The network thought he was bluffing. He wasn't. When the story leaked to Variety on December 5th, fans erupted. ABC received more than 10,000 letters demanding the show stay centered on Richie. Executives backed down. The name stayed, Ron stayed. But something broke after that. By 1977, the show was earning $50 million a year. Henry Winkler was making $75,000 per episode. Ron was making $25,000. He was still the lead, but not the priority. The tension didn't end there. Co-stars like Anson Williams grew angry over screen time and pay. Rumors spread about fistfights, walkouts, and favoritism. And while the cast feuded around him, Ron started thinking about something that scared studios the most. Not acting, but directing. And his first attempt behind the camera would nearly destroy his future before it even began. While millions still saw him as Richie Cunningham, Ron Howard was already planning his escape from acting. He didn't want to stay trapped in a role forever, so in early 1975, during a production break, he tried something bold. He directed his first short film, Deed of Daring Do. It was only 10 minutes long, shot on a shoestring $2,000 budget, with Henry Winkler making a cameo, but it lit a fire he couldn't ignore. That little project set off a chain reaction. By 1977, he convinced producer Roger Corman to let him direct his first full-length feature, Grand Theft Auto. The film had a $600,000 budget, tiny by Hollywood standards, but every mistake could cripple his career. Ron co-wrote it, starred in it, and directed it while still filming Happy Days. It should have been a breakthrough. Instead, the set turned dangerous. During one of the car stunts, veteran stuntman Paul Bartel was seriously injured. Bones were broken, internal bleeding. Production nearly shut down. Ron was terrified, not only for the man who got hurt, but for his future. A lawsuit followed in 1978 and was settled quietly. If the story had leaked, he could have been blacklisted before his directing career even began. He finished the film anyway. When Grand Theft Auto hit theaters, it shocked everyone. It made $15 million,
25 times its budget. To Hollywood, it looked like a success story. But Ron walked away with a lesson nobody else saw. One accident, one lawsuit, or one rumor could erase everything he'd built. He didn't celebrate. He didn't slow down. Instead, he made a decision that stunned the network. In 1980, while Happy Days still had 20 million weekly viewers, he walked away. ABC offered him $100,000 to stay 3 more years. He refused. Ron wasn't chasing fame anymore. He was chasing control. But directing would only get more dangerous from here, because the next accidents wouldn't just spark lawsuits. They would trigger death threats, FBI involvement, and global outrage. Leaving Happy Days didn't free Ron Howard from danger. It pushed him into a new kind of pressure, where every mistake had higher stakes, bigger budgets, and real consequences. His directing career took off fast. In 1982, he released Night Shift. Then came Splash in 1984, the film that turned Tom Hanks into a star and made nearly $70 million on an $11 million budget. But success didn't mean peace on set. During filming in New York on July 15, 1983, Tom Hanks got into a screaming match over script changes. Howard had to physically step in to keep the movie from shutting down. That was just the beginning. In 1985, during production of Cocoon, things took a darker turn. An extra named Harold Jenkins was fired after causing disruptions. On February 12th, he sent violent letters threatening cast and crew. Howard and the team had to bring in 24-hour security that cost $150,000. The script was softened, the release was delayed, and for the first time, Howard realized filmmaking could put his life in danger. But it got worse. On Backdraft in 1990, a fire stunt went horribly wrong. Flames got out of control. Kurt Russell's face and hand were burned. 3 crew members were also injured. OSHA stepped in and investigated safety violations. The film still made $152 million, but Ron didn't forget the panic, the screams, and the guilt. Then came Apollo 13 in 1994. Tom Hanks demanded line-by-line accuracy from NASA transcripts. On October 12th, he halted the shoot over script changes, costing $2 million in delays. On October 18th, Howard threatened to walk unless the production stabilized. NASA officials had to step in to mediate. By the late 1990s, danger followed him onto every set. Lawsuits and risks weren't rare, they were routine. And soon, one film wouldn't just bring controversy, it would bring religious outrage, bomb threats, and international bans. Because Hollywood wasn't prepared for what would happen when Ron Howard touched faith and conspiracy on a global scale. By the early 2000s, Ron Howard had survived accidents, lawsuits, and on-set chaos, but nothing compared to what came next. In 2006, he released the Vinci Code, and the backlash was unlike anything he'd faced in his entire career. The film didn't just upset people, it ignited a global firestorm. Religious groups accused him of attacking Christianity. The storyline suggested Jesus had a child with Mary Magdalene and that a Catholic organization kept it secret. Within weeks, protests erupted in multiple countries. In India, church leaders demanded a nationwide ban. In the Philippines, it was restricted to adults only. In Italy, priests publicly condemned it. And in France, security was so tight that police swept the Cannes premiere after a bomb scare. Ron Howard himself received death threats. After Opus Dei called the movie a twisted image of the church, Howard and the cast were assigned bodyguards. The Vatican tried to block filming at its locations, and some priests even staged boycotts outside theaters. Ironically, the attacks only fueled ticket sales. The movie made $760 million worldwide. But it didn't end there. In 2009, he released Angels and Demons, and the Catholic Church quietly blacklisted him again. Rome denied filming permits. Sets had to be rebuilt from scratch.
Howard would later say the hidden boycott alone cost the production nearly $50 million in lost access. Even movies with no religious angle brought fallout. In 2014, his company Imagine Entertainment was sued over The Good Lie by Sudanese refugees who claimed their stories were used without fair compensation. The case ran over 100 pages and settled in 2017. Then came Rush. In 2013, a stunt driver crashed during filming and sued for negligence. Weeks later, a second tragedy struck. Sean Edwards, the son of the stunt coordinator, died in a separate crash shortly after the film's release. Howard was subpoenaed and accused of cutting safety corners to stay under budget. The film still made $152 million, but Ron didn't forget the panic, the screams, and the guilt. And while he was still fighting the industry and the public, pressure was rising inside his own family, and his reputation was about to enter a new kind of storm. By the time the 2010s ended, Ron Howard wasn't fighting just Hollywood. He was fighting the narrative built around his own last name. In 2017, his father, Rance Howard, died at 89 after battling heart failure caused by West Nile virus. He had acted in more than 300 films and shows, right up until 2 days before his death. Rumors swirled that Ron and his brother Clint were feuding over the estate. They denied it, but Hollywood loves drama more than truth. Then came a new wave of criticism, one he never had to face before. In 2025, his daughter Bryce Dallas Howard addressed the Nepo baby controversy head-on. On a major podcast, she admitted that her career was built on privilege. She named him, her Uncle Clint, and both grandparents as proof that access, not luck, opened doors. Fans were split. Some praised her honesty. Others accused Ron of quietly boosting her career behind the scenes. At the same time, his 50-year marriage to Cheryl was back under the spotlight. Whispered rumors claimed they nearly divorced in the 1980s because of his obsession with work. No confirmation ever came, but silence often speaks louder than statements. Even his career wasn't immune to fresh drama. In 2024, Hillbilly Elegy, a movie he directed years earlier, came back to haunt him when its author, J.D. Vance, became Donald Trump's running mate. Ron publicly admitted he was disappointed and caught off guard by Vance's political turn. That one comment sparked backlash from both sides, Hollywood elites and conservative critics. Then came Eden in 2025, his most recent film. Inspired by a true 1920s murder story, it featured scenes so grim some festival audiences walked out. Reviews called it uneasy, dark, and unsettling. Howard admitted the production made him nervous. And just when he thought he'd seen it all, something unexpected happened. For the first time in more than 40 years, he returned to acting and ended up with a real bruised rib on an unscripted fight scene on set. Suddenly, he was nominated for an Emmy Award for acting himself in a show with Seth Rogen. After decades of silence, Ron Howard has started telling his side of the story. But the questions he hasn't answered yet, they're the ones Hollywood is most afraid he finally says out loud.